What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. Week 9, Sunday, the early games, the afternoon games, they're pretty much in the books right now. And joining me to talk a little ball is my guy, Chris Allen. Chris, what's going on, buddy?
So, Matt, I'm going to have to tell you, I had a whole lineup ready to go. It was just a minute left in the Bengals game. They had just recovered the onside kick shortly afterwards. They get the touchdown. And I'm thinking, I'm about to come into this group chat and just let y'all have it after this morning. I was ready to come in next Sunday with so many outfit changes. I was going to have all of my different Cincinnati Bengals gear ready to line up. Each segment is going to be something different. I was ready to give it to y'all. And of course, the Bengals find yet another way to disappoint me. But that's how it goes. It's just one thing after another. And as fantasy managers, just even outside of that Bengals game, folks that thought Drake London was going to have a slow start coming back from the injury, he comes up with 3 touchdowns. Rico Dowdle having the backfield to himself in a tough matchup against the Packers, of course, he shows out. It's the one thing that you think is not going to happen that winds up turning out to be the case. That is the NFL that we live in today. But no, either way, happy to sit down and talk ball with you because week 9, just more chaos for us to try and sift through and figure out how best to advise fantasy managers moving forward.
No question. And there's a lot to get into. If last week's slate of games was full of blowouts and some non-competitive football, this is a pretty competitive slate of Sunday games here in week 9. So this is how we do it on our recap show. First segment, these are the games that we care most about, plus our boom and bust players of the week. Second segment, those are the games that we sort of care about. Third segment, games that could have been an email. So let's get into it here. But first, boom and bust players of the week. Our boom player of the week has to be the aforementioned Drake London, 34.3 fantasy points on the back of 3 touchdowns, 14 targets from Michael Penix in this game. I have a lot to say about Drake London coming up later, but Chris, as you mentioned, 1 game away due to the injury, he gets right back out there and was just a beast in contested catch situations today.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the sick one-handed outbreaker that he caught for a touchdown. I mean, I thought it was going to be one of those styles makes fights type of matchups with him having to face off against Christian Gonzalez. But really, they really showed how well Drake London can perform, not just from a route running standpoint, but really like you were just mentioning in those contested catch situations as well. And I'm sure once we get to that game, we'll start to see just the dichotomy between it's Drake London and literally everybody else for the Falcons passing game. So seeing him come back from injury and literally take on that much volume and show out like this, I mean, really for fantasy managers that had any concern about what London could be and have any concerns about also Michael Penix returning, but really all of those concerns had to be laid to waste going up against a Patriots defense, which has been fairly solid throughout most of the season too.
Yeah, it was great to see. They did a lot to move Drake London into the slot to get him away from Christian Gonzalez. Like he was in coverage by Marcus Jones several times, which just like from a size matchup standpoint, that's not going to work out. So it's great to see Drake London return and absolutely smash in this game. On the negative side, and there were definitely some candidates for this one, I ended up going with Jahmyr Gibbs from this one for bust player of the week for just 4.3 points from the Lions superstar running back. Bit of an odd game for the Lions overall. They lose to the Minnesota Vikings in J.J. McCarthy's return to the starting lineup, which went pretty well. And, man, nothing got going from a ground game perspective for this Lions offense. They were pretty much blocked up. One of their offensive linemen, Christian Mahogany, was injured late in this game as well, so that could have had something to do with it. Penei Sewell was in and out of the lineup as well. So just a tough day for Jahmyr Gibbs, who we expect to be one of the highest scoring players every single week. That was not the case here in week 9, Chris.
Exactly. I mean, the offensive line injuries, I think even Taylor Decker was in and out of at that game as well. So seeing both Gibbs and Montgomery met on almost half of their attempts met at or behind the line of scrimmage. So if the Lions aren't able to get the run game going, of course, that's going to translate to whatever they're going to try and do with Jared Goff in the passing game. And while Amon-Ra St. Brown was able to at least make it for fantasy managers, seeing this for Jahmyr Gibbs, it's going to be one of those tough days. It's going to happen at some point, but you'd hope to see a bit more, especially with the expectations that we had for Detroit's offense as a whole coming out of the bye.
All right, let's get into the games we care about most here, starting with the one that just wrapped up right before we went live here. Bills 28, Chiefs 21. On the Bills side of this, Chris, What is your takeaway here? Because to me, it was just the balance of this offense and how they were able to, honestly, with some of the limitations in the wide receiver room, this is what I think the team should look like from an ideal perspective if they're trying to beat some of the best teams in the NFL. What did you take away from watching this game on the Buffalo side of things?
So for Buffalo, we even talked about it earlier today that it was going to be, well, can we get anything out of the wide receivers for Josh Allen? Is Keon Coleman really going to take a step forward? And of course, yeah, a couple of targets here and there are first down in critical situations for the Bills. But really, we've seen this throughout the season. It's really just been the tight ends. I mean, Dalton Kincaid showing up for just getting over the century mark, 101 yards and that touchdown. And of course, Dawson Knox mixing in as well. It's almost the lighter version of, well, I guess we'll talk about the Packers later, but seeing how often they're using some of their tight ends and running backs versus really focusing on the wide receivers. The hope would be, I know we've got a couple of days before the trade deadline, but if there's any other assistance that we can get Josh Allen, the thought might be that they try and look to acquire somebody that can either stretch the defense or help out Josh Allen in the receiving game, because seeing those stat lines from Keon Coleman and not really seeing a ton from Elijah Moore and really just a focus on the running backs and tight ends, that's my biggest takeaway out of this, because if you drafted or trying to see if you can get anything out of those wide receivers, it really is an uphill battle for any of fantasy managers that are looking to that type of production for those guys.
Yeah, it's just like, this is what the room is, they just don't have a guy that can be the lead dog in the passing game. Khalil Shakir runs the most routes on this team with 21 on 30 Josh Allen dropbacks. So 70% route participation for Khalil Shakir. That leads the team. They're back to like the big rotation here. Even Keon Coleman, who has mostly been an every down player, he runs 19 routes in this game, draws 2 targets, catches both of them for 17 yards, 91% of his snaps on the outside. So like Curtis Samuel mixes in for 15 routes, Tyrell Shavers for 10. Elijah Moore had that 128-yard reception where I had to be like, don't say it, don't say that he's the best perimeter separator on the team. Don't say it. Shut up. But that's the state of this wide receiver room. But to your point about Dalton Kincaid, I think he's been the best downfield receiver for this team all season long. It's just difficult, Chris, because from a fantasy perspective, he only runs around on 43% of the dropbacks. Like, that is just so much lower than we want from some of these set it and forget it tight ends. But is the fact that he's attached to Josh Allen, and he has clearly been their best downfield receiver. Like, Khalil Shakir is good at what he's doing, but once again, it's a sub 1 air yard per target game from him. So we know what he's doing from a usage perspective. So there is the fact that Kincaid is just so important to their downfield passing game, being attached to Josh Allen. Is that enough for you to overlook some of these playing time concerns when he's kind of on regression watch every single week?
And I think that's kind of where I'm at. It's almost like I made the wrong comparison earlier. I was thinking more about the Browns and how they try and use their tight ends and running backs versus really not getting anything from their receiver core. And if that's going to continue to be the case, then yeah, I'm with you. I would love to see Kincaid running 60, 70, 80% of the routes. But if he's going to be used sparingly, if they want to try and get more offensive linemen on the field in order to create some of those holes for James Cook, and that's when you see Kincaid afterwards, okay, fine, I understand the approach. And especially with the deficiencies that we see in their downfield passing game without having that talent there, I'm fine with continuing to trot out Dalton Kincaid on a week in, week out basis, just because we know that when he is out on the field from a targets per route run standpoint, that's really has been Kincaid's calling card. And so if they're really not going to try and shift their personnel packages to fit their more pass catching tight end, but they're still going to use him when he's out there, I'll take that, just knowing what we can get from him.
46% targets per route run today, as you mentioned. That has been his calling card all season long. He only has 1 game below 25%. 2 games below 25%, week 1 and week 4. And even some of those games, one of those in week 1 was one of 3 games this year where he was over 50% of the snaps. And in today, he's only on the field for 27% of the snaps, which is just so crazy for a guy that absolutely balls out in fantasy and like he has been producing all season long. But this is with the way this offense not just rotates the wide receivers, but rotates the personnel grouping overall. I mean, they use a ton of 2 tight end. Jackson Hawes is a blocking tight end for them. It's kind of replaced those jumbo 6 offensive lineman looks. Reggie Gilliam, the fullback, gets in the mix as well. So we asked the YouTube chat whether the Bills should trade for a wide receiver before the deadline. Obviously, as expected, they run away with 86% to yes. I wonder how I wonder how shy Brandon Beane might be about doing that after it went so poorly for Amari Cooper last year. I mean, they gave up a 3rd-round pick for a really unproductive rental season from Cooper. I do wonder if they'll be hesitant towards that. And they just kind of lean into more of this balanced offense because James Cook runs the ball 27 times for over 100 yards once again. It feels like that's the identity of their passing game. Like, yes, it would help to obviously have a wide receiver to dunk on folks, Chris, but at the same time, if they don't land a difference-making wide receiver, I think this is the type of formula we should expect from the Bills offense the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be too surprised because even the wide receivers that have been rumored to be traded, so like your Rashid Shaheed, so let's say that he's the guy that they wind up trading for. Okay, fine. I can understand the need for a field-stretching wide receiver like Shaheed, but even then, I feel like if that were to happen, we would get over our skis in terms of, oh, Shaheed, they need that type of player, so now Josh Allen is going to turn into this 15-20% deep ball target rate type of passer. And while Allen clearly has the arm to do it, that's not the way this offense operates. It's more of this intermediate type of looks as we've seen to Kincaid, as we've seen to any of the running backs so far. So while even if they were to trade for a running back that allows them to press more defenses deep, I'm not necessarily going to say that even if they wind up getting a guy like that, it's going to translate into fantasy production or instant fantasy production for that wide receiver. So that's really where my concern is.
I agree with everything you just said there, especially from a chemistry standpoint. Like, that was the thing with Cooper and Allen last year. Obviously, Cooper dealt with a lot of injuries, but they were just really never on the same page. It's hard to just drop a guy into the middle of the season in an offense that Allen has a lot of timing with a lot of these other players and just like, hey, go to work and be a 10 target per game type player. Not to mention from an archetype standpoint, the guys that are most likely available, Rashid Shaheed, Jacoby Myers, those are kind of slot flanker types, and they have an abundance of those. If they were able to get like a Jalen Waddle or a Chris Olave or an AJ Brown or something like that, that's a different conversation. I just don't think realistically those guys are actually available. But of course, we'll see what happens over the next few days. On the Chiefs side of things here, definitely a frustrating offensive performance for the Kansas City Chiefs. I was surprised with how the Bills were able to consistently get pressure with 4 in this one. I mean, Joey Bosa wrecked this game. What was kind of your reaction to watching this Chiefs offense here?
You can kind of see on the faces of some of the Chiefs offensive players, they looked rattled, and you kind of felt that watching some of their drives from a drive to drive basis. Patrick Mahomes getting knocked down a few times, took a few sacks, and it wasn't just him. I mean, you could see, Travis Kelce got rocked on that end zone shot towards the back end of the first half, where it seemed like, again, that the Bills from a physical perspective, they were I wouldn't want to try and use the term imposing their will, but at least making sure that all of their drives were going to be something that they were going to have to grind out in order to get down the field. But of course, Patrick Mahomes, he puts on his Superman cape every now and again, flicking the ball down on a freaking 4th and 17 to Rashee Rice and doing some of those things to continue drives going. Of course, that stuff was going to happen, but it just felt like there was a level of perfection from the Chiefs required for them to stay within this game that, of course, a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes can do, but still having that requirement for a game like this, it just felt like after the first few weeks, having them run up against a team like the Bills that was ready for them from a defensive standpoint, just felt like a kind of a showstopper after the offensive performances and improvements we had seen over the Chiefs from the previous 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm really interested to dig into kind of the coverage data from this one, which obviously that's going to take a minute and really go back and watch it on film, of course, to see what they did from a secondary perspective, because you just thought like this Bills defense plays a lot of zone. They did get Maxwell Harrison back, their first-round rookie corner, who obviously is a speed guy, so maybe that played a bit of a difference in terms of them mixing up the coverages. But usually this Bills defense is pretty zone-heavy, and you can attack them in that way, which the Chiefs had done at an enormously efficient rate so far. That was just not the case here. Like, yeah, Rashee Rice has that 29-yard reception, 80 yards on the day. Really, this was just not a productive passing game. 15 completions for Patrick Mahomes, a career low, as we just noted earlier. The Bills defense, I just got to tip my cap to them. I did not see this performance coming. I thought the Chiefs would get the better of them, but I think there are still, despite the national media rushing to like, Chiefs are back, I think they still have some flaws from a personnel standpoint and some of the design stuff that I think are keeping them off of kind of, at least for me, my first tier of teams in the NFL. So shout out to the Bills like performance in this one defensively. But I do think that the Chiefs have some personnel questions on offense. Backfield update in this one. If you thought like Brashard Smith was going to be anything more than kind of what he has been so far, that did not happen here. Kareem Hunt leads the way with 11 carries. Brashard Smith gets 3. Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets off the practice squad for 2 carries as well.
Yeah, and that's where I was somewhat disappointed in the fact that, Kareem Hunt, and going up against the Bills' rush defense, I thought he was going to get the start and ultimately the majority of the work, but not really seeing a lot from Brashard Smith, not necessarily as a runner, but even as a pass catcher, despite all of the pass game woes we were just talking about for Kansas City. Whereas, Rashee Rice gets stuff going, but saw a few things like working for Travis Kelce, and really not a ton out of any of the ancillary guys. Like, of course, Hollywood Brown gets the one like down the field. But if there wasn't, from a down to down perspective, more work or more opportunities for guys like either Smith or even Noah Gray, as we had seen him getting worked in a couple of games beforehand, again, it just felt like there was a lot of frustration for Mahomes and the rest of the passing game, because the Bills really did at least do their homework and had enough working on the back end in order to keep the picture moving enough for Mahomes to hold the ball down and not really be able to get and connect with some of his receivers as we expected him to in this game.
All right, we've wasted enough time here, Chris. We got to get to the second game that we care the most about, and that unfortunately brings us back to your Bengals. Bears 47, Bengals 42. 89 combined points between these two teams. Obviously, we'll start on the Bears side of things. And, of course, we should acknowledge that the Bengals defense, as we kept giving you crap for on Fantasy Football Live, that's what for folks who don't watch that show, that's what Chris was referring to. We said, he's going to have a ton of ammunition to come back to us if the Bengals win this game, if the defense shows up in the group chat. The Bengals defense did not show up, and I think the only people more frustrated than Chris Allen about the Bengals defense is the Bengals offense. There was a lot of frustration from those guys on that side of the ball after the game ended. We can get to that when we talk about the Bengals, but just a couple caveats before we get into some of these individual player performances for Chicago. Obviously, yes, Bengals defense caveat. The other one is I think we have to acknowledge what a weird box score this is for the Chicago Bears. 4 players, count them, 4 players threw a pass for this team, despite the fact that it was competitive all the way through and the starting quarterback did not get injured. Obviously, Caleb Williams was one of them. Tyson Bagent, the backup quarterback, threw a pass. DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, those guys threw passes. The starting quarterback himself, Caleb Williams, caught 2 passes, one for a touchdown from DJ. Not record a catch at all in this game. So that was just a weird box score. We got to just acknowledge that before we talk about some of these individual player performances.
Yeah, Ben Johnson, he was in his trick play bag just on the first series. I think they had a Philly special and like 2 other trick plays as they just waltz right down the field for almost a 10 or 12 play drive that capped off like a 70-plus yard with a touchdown on their first drive. Then afterwards, we saw the double pass from Bagent to Williams and all of that. So, it was as creative as you would expect. Ben Johnson kind of playing with his food for a bit, but then of course the Bengals tried to make it a game, and then we all saw what wound up happening at the end of that. So it was just kind of a wild performance or wild play calling series for Ben Johnson, but I kind of expected that just given the defense that he was going up against.
Yeah, exactly. It was the right matchup. I talked about this morning and earlier this week as well on this show, that this is the right defense for Ben Johnson's offense to really crush it. Not just the passes over the middle, but also just build it off a power run game, which that was the 2 breakout performances here that we got from some of these rookies. Colson Loveland on some of those shot plays over the middle, and Kyle Monangai as the lead back for this team. Let's talk about Monangai first. Breakout game for him. 85% of the running back touches with DeAndre Swift not available. 78% of the overall snaps, and 198 yards from scrimmage in this one. 123 of those yards came after contact for Kyle Monangai. The Bengals defense overall, according to NFL Pro, missed 15 tackles, allowing 133 yards after those missed tackles. So again, Bengals defense caveat, but super impressive performance from Kyle Monangai, who I think has been building towards this over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and we had seen as DeAndre Swift had been trying to manage that groin injury that ultimately left him out for this matchup against the Bengals. We had seen a little bit more of Monangai over the past like 2 to 3 weeks and starting to see him and the level of explosiveness that he brought to that backfield. And so now, of course, if you get this essentially like rainbow strip type of matchup that you get for whenever anybody faces Cincinnati, this is what you get out of it. And it wasn't anything exotic that they were throwing at them. It was a 3rd and 5. I believe that they wound up just running off tackle from an guy that went for 9 yards. So it's just, that's what you get when you face a defense that allows this type of performance on a week in, week out basis. So if you get that volume, and actually, honestly, he probably should have had a little over, or he would have been just short of 200 rushing yards in a touchdown, because the touchdown run from Britton Brown, the backup, the only reason he was in the game at that point was because Monangai needed a breather from the previous 2 runs before that. So that's what you get when you face Cincinnati. You just get this level of performance from everybody.
Yeah, so we'll see what the split looks like for Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift when Swift is healthy. They've kind of been building towards a little bit of a poor man's Gibbs Montgomery type split anyways, or maybe the more apt example is actually DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams when Ben Johnson was originally with the Lions before they kind of upgraded those backfield players. But I do think Monangai brings a nice dimension, and probably is a guy who I'm not going to say he's going to completely make DeAndre Swift irrelevant, but I think it could get closer to a little bit more of a committee than we've seen in some of these recent weeks. The other breakout rookie was Colson Loveland, who ran a route on 66% of the dropbacks. Cole Kmet did leave this game with an injury at one point. He was targeted on 24% of the routes and 9.5 yards after catch per reception. So this looked like a great matchup for Colson Loveland against your Bengals, and he absolutely delivered. How much sustainability do you see from the rookie tight end here?
Well, now seeing he gets, again, the wonderful matchup against Cincinnati, but also it's just the after the catch ability. And it wasn't just all from the 50-yard catch and run that he had in order to essentially seal the game against Cincinnati. But even before that, on a couple of catches that he had like across the middle of the field, and you see the yak ability that he brings to this passing offense, where if we're going to see a bit more of DJ Moore used in the short area of the field and Adunze deep, he could wind up being that intermediate type target that could really help out a guy like Caleb Williams. So I was at least a bit more encouraged from this performance. Not to say that this should be the result week in and week out, but still it's the what he can produce or how he can produce once he gets the ball in his hands. And hopefully this should be a bit more encouraging for Ben Johnson to try and integrate him more into this offense, assuming Kmet has to either miss a bit more time or maybe he just tries to, again, integrate him a bit more in this offense, give him a few more snaps moving forward versus trying to keep Kmet in this game.
Yeah, and just last note, of course, mentioned Rome Odunze did not catch a pass in this game. I know that's super tilting. I'm sure we're going to get a ton of panic meter stuff about him tomorrow, so I don't feel like I need to say too much about it because I'm sure we're going to discuss it tomorrow. But just a super tilting game, but you got to just kind of flush it and keep moving on. Like I always say, this happens with wide receivers. Stuff happens. It just is. I know it's super frustrating. I have Rome Odunze on teams, and it's very annoying, but not something I'm overly concerned about long term. Still think he's one of the most important players in this offense. Let's flip to the Bengals side of things here, the offense at least. Joe Flacco leads the NFL in passing yards at 1,254 and passing touchdowns at 11 the last 4 weeks, Chris Allen. So shout out to Scott Pianowski. This is the Carnival team of the year once again. The defense is as hopeless as ever, and look, Joe Flacco's just doing the Joe Burrow impression. He's only thrown 2 picks these last 4 games as well. So, I know it stinks for you as a fan of the team, but everybody's getting home from a fantasy standpoint. Even Chase Brown gets blocked up in the ground game here, but he catches 8 balls for 75 yards and led the team with 14 targets.
Yeah, and that was my concern last week because when we were reviewing the Bengals and their comeback attempt from last week, it was Jamar Chase and everybody else. T. Higgins just had 2 targets in their Week 8 game, and then of course we didn't see a ton from anybody else. And now in this week, it is a bit more spread out. Higgins is back to his role as the wide receiver 2-ish. I mean, he had a couple of sick grabs. The one on the left sideline that he had, I mean, that just looked like the ball just, I don't know, he had magnets in his gloves or something along those lines. Yeah, it's this one that we're showing right here. It's just, I don't know how he catches some of those. It would have been a lot nicer if the result had been a win for Cincinnati. But this is, from a fantasy standpoint, these are the types of performances that you would expect to see. Joe Flacco or whomever is under center for Cincinnati throwing it to the good players, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and of course seeing Chase Brown involved in the passing game a bit more was at least a confidence builder for me, because looking at him moving forward, it was, well, we saw Samaje Perine starting to edge into some of the touches. He leaves this game with an ankle injury, but even if Chase Brown picks up more of the carries, is he still going to get used in the receiving game? And the answer is yes. So the idea would be that, well, Flacco's still nursing the shoulder injury, so that's why his average depth of target might be a little bit lower and why he might be more apt to focus on the short and intermediate parts of the field. But still, if Brown is going to have this type of usage, he should be at least close to that RB1 that we had hoped to draft earlier in the later parts of the offseason.
All right, let's get to the next game that we really care about here. Vikings 27, Lions 24. On the Vikings side of it, J.J. McCarthy, pretty damn good in this game.
Yeah,
throws a couple touchdowns. 7 of 11 passes completed for 91 yards and a touchdown when he was blitzed in this game. So I don't know. I personally, my bar for McCarthy was a little low just based on what we saw the first 2 weeks and how long it had been since we saw him. But I certainly think he cleared that bar by a healthy gap in this one. I thought this was a nice performance for him on 30 dropbacks in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions still threw plenty of gas at him. He was pressured on over 40% of his dropbacks, but still seeing him, I mean, he did wind up taking 5 sacks when he was pressured, so that wasn't great. But yeah, the pecking order and who he was trying to target when he was throwing the ball, for fantasy standpoint, that's what we wanted to see. Justin Jefferson still comes up with over 35% of the targets. Jordan Addison, while still just around 20% of the targets, 40% of the team's air yards. And Jalen Naylor, that nice wide receiver 3 if you're in a deeper league, yeah, it's still at least usable from that standpoint. But I would say, though, the target rates or target shares are still there, but that whole passing pie is much smaller now that you have J.J. McCarthy under center. And that was kind of the concern, because even in this game where J.J. McCarthy plays well, I mean, just 143 passing yards. So if you are trying to break that up amongst at least two-ish wide receivers, and then you got TJ Hawkinson still trying to work in and Aaron Jones as well, it's difficult from a fantasy standpoint to try and divvy up enough of that production to really have an impact from a fantasy standpoint. So still good to see McCarthy playing well against a tough defense. I mean, a divisional matchup, get all of that. But still, I think that's the only concern that I would have from a fantasy standpoint is, can we see him really get pressed into passing more downfield to create enough production to really support all of these guys?
It's a great point because, yeah, the share numbers look good, but just the overall volume was not there. And this was a positive game script for the Vikings. That's something we had not seen really in the J.J. McCarthy little glimpse that we got of him this year. They were kind of controlling this one throughout. Their defense played pretty well against the Lions offense, like we mentioned earlier, shutting down that ground game. So that will be the next key test for McCarthy is, does he what happens, and do they allow him to open the offense up? And will that benefit these receivers? Because right now, there was just no case to be made that they were better with Carson Wentz, from a team perspective. He was not going to take him to Super Bowl or anything, but he certainly was getting the ball to the wide receivers from a fantasy standpoint. I think that's obviously going to be a frustration if McCarthy remains sort of in this game manager type role. Another update from this team, by the way, Aaron Jones kind of was an explosive answer for this team in the ground game, but he suffered an AC joint injury. Sounds like he might be able to play through it, but just something to monitor this next week. All right. On the other side of here, the Lions, I was surprised really by how they were kind of, I wouldn't say overwhelmed, but the Vikings managed to pressure Jared Goff on 48% of his dropbacks, despite a 2.44 time to throw. And Jahmyr Gibbs was asked to pass block a lot in this game, as we're showing on the screen here. He also, by the way, according to NFL Pro, allowed 7 pressures on 16 pass blocking snaps, which tied for the most pressures allowed by a running back in a game since at least 2018. So asked to pass block a lot, didn't do so well, apparently, according to the next-gen stats there. But not a great day for the Lions offense, even though some of the guys like Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta and these guys in the passing game get home.
Yeah, actually, I saw a rep where I think it was, I forget who it was that was on the blitzing them, but Jahmyr Gibbs tried to catch him with his shoulder pad, but really only got to the side of the defender rushing, didn't really square him up on his chest, which wound up leading to a sack from Jared Goff. So yeah, just a tough outing. And I believe we kind of assumed Brian Flores was going to try and throw as many defenders at Jared Goff as possible to get him rattled. And at least when I was looking at this in True Media, he was blitzed on over 40% of his dropbacks, or just over 40%. And it felt like that with how often Goff would hit his back step of his drop. And then afterwards, you would see him just kind of hitch real quick and either turtle and take the sack or try and create something in the short area of the field. So watching a lot of this back right now, I see some of the issues with and we talked earlier about the offensive line injuries and how often we saw some of their linemen going in and out the field. So if this is going to be the case moving forward, I would have some concerns, but they're not always going to face a defense that has the talent and also the coaching staff behind it in order to put that much pressure on Jared Goff.
Right, and we don't know how many of those blitzes were supposed to be like, hey, we're trying to stuff the run here. Like, we're bringing extra bodies into the box. We're blitzing here, because sometimes this happens. This is like what happened with the Dolphins-Falcons matchup last week, where we expect Bijan Robinson to just go crazy because the Dolphins' run defense has been terrible. Well, the Dolphins know that their run defense has been terrible too, so they can dedicate those extra resources to try to stop the run. And the Vikings defense had really struggled as a rush unit overall. So I think they might have been like, hey, if we can take away the run game, we can limit some of the passing effectiveness of this team, and that's how we're going to be able to win it on that side of it. So certainly did not expect this result, but you can kind of diagnose maybe how it happened in hindsight, which I know doesn't help your fantasy teams, but at least can kind of explain what went on here. Let's go to the last game that we really care about. That is Patriots 24, Falcons 23. The Patriots just once again able to win a game here. They're lucky that the Falcons kicker missed an extra point, and that was able to be the difference in the game. But we did learn about their backfield we learned a couple things, actually. We learned about their backfield rotation in terms of the rookies with no Ramondre Stevenson. Pretty even split in terms of the overall work for this team. TreVeyon Henderson, though, played more snaps, 75%. 14 carries for him, 11 for Terrell Jennings, who was the short yardage back. He got the look inside the 5-yard line. But TreVeyon Henderson was the commanding leader in terms of routes, 73% route participation in this game. So going forward, we know that will be his role if Stevenson continues to miss time.
Yeah, and pretty efficient on the ground as well. 57.1% rushing success rate. So a solid outing. The hope would just going to be that we would see him once they got inside the 20 and inside the 10. But since Terrell Jennings, I believe he either had an explosive or like a fairly long run to get them there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's why Vrabel allowed him to just take the goal line plunge in afterwards. So that's my anxiety of trying to roster a guy like TreVeyon Henderson, where you do have this committee, because we don't know if Ramondre Stevenson is going to miss even more time. And then also in week 10, they wind up playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who are just coming off of their bye. And their strength is in run defense. So outside of Henderson as a pass catcher, I'm not really seeing the upside for him, even trying to think about him as a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 for week 10. It's just a tough outlook for him.
No, that's a really good point, and we'll continue to kind of track that. Of course, if Ramondre Stevenson is going to miss time, or if they trade for a back at the deadline. Drake May throws an interception here. Drake May throws an interception here, and yet he still becomes the fourth quarterback in NFL history, according to NFL Pro, to record 200-plus passing yards and a 100-plus passer rating in 8 consecutive games within a season. So he just continues to get it done, even if there's that one mistake here. Can't throw that interception, but it happens. We did learn something in the receiving rotation as well, even though nobody had like a monster game here. Kayshon Boutte went down with a hamstring injury after just 12 routes, and it was rookie Kyle Williams who took his snaps. Kyle Williams didn't record a catch or anything like that in this game. Still looks like there's some chemistry and timing issues between May and Kyle Williams, which you would expect. Kyle Williams has probably barely practiced with Drake May at all, but it wasn't like, oh, Pop Douglas got a promotion. Pop Douglas remained in his slot role. He made some plays, had a nice game, which shout out to him. I believe he said his uncle was shot and killed I believe like last night, he said after the game. And then,
What?
so he was really emotional to come. Yeah, he was really emotional to come out. And I think it was, I want to say it was Cam Wolf. I'll go back and find it here as we're talking, but I think it was Cam Wolf that had the interview with him afterwards. I'll find it, make sure I get the credit right there. But yeah, so like shout out to Pop Douglas, who had a really nice game here, but he did not have like a role promotional 100 yards for him, but it was Kyle Williams that kind of took up that perimeter receiving option with Kayshon Boutte out in this game.
And I think this is the song that we've been singing about the Patriots pass catching group for the entirety of the season, where, yeah, we want to trust Hunter Henry and he'll pop up for a touchdown, but then the week after that, it'll just be 1 to 2 targets. Yes, of course, we want to trust Stephon Diggs because of his route running ability, but he hadn't been ramped up to a full-time player until, where was that, like week 4, week 5? And so even that's been tough to trust on a week in and week out basis. So I believe in this game, you have it up right here about the number of pass catchers that were involved for Drake May. He had 10 different players that he targeted at least once. So if we're thinking about this moving forward from a fantasy standpoint, who is really outside of maybe Diggs and Hunter Henry that you're really itching to get into your lineup? Because Demario Douglas, to your point, yes, he might work in for 4 to 5 targets, but it's really on those explosive plays that he winds up creating a lot of that production. So it's really just Diggs and Henry for me. All these other guys are essentially role players in the sense that, yes, they're helping Drake May get to really ascend to the heights that he's getting to this point, but I'm not really looking to try and have those guys in my lineup from a week out standpoint, at least not at this point.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm interested to track Kyle Williams. He's not somebody we're picking up right now, but a potential second half of the season rookie if he continues to get more work, and when Kayshon Boutte's back, maybe he can step into Mac Hollins' role. But yeah, right now it's Henry, it's Diggs, and everybody else is kind of a rotational player. We did show that as well, that it was Cam Wolf with the report here that Pop Douglas's uncle was shot and killed last night, and he turns around this morning and has his best NFL game with 100 yards and a touchdown. So really what a moment for Pop Douglas. Obviously thoughts go out to him and his family as well. Let's get to the Falcons side of things here. They lose this game again because their kicker, Parker Romo, misses the damn extra point, and just very Falcons of them. Despite, I think, Michael Penix having like a nice second half to get them close here after it was a little bit farther out. Bijan Robinson, another slow day on the ground. It was a bad matchup. We talked about that. This Patriots run defense has been really good all year. Their investments up front have really paid off. Also, the Falcons had some injuries at guard in this game, so that's something to track throughout the course of the week. But he did save it from a fantasy standpoint, Chris, with 8 for 50 as a receiver on 10 targets. The Falcons just put on a freaking show, dude, in terms of just throw it to your good players. Bijan Robinson, 10 targets, and Drake London, 14 targets in this game. We talked about him a little bit earlier, but after week 9 now, Chris, this is something I brought up with Ray earlier this week. Michael Penix now has 5 of his 10 starts with an adjusted yards per attempt over 7.0. Drake London's target totals in those games after today's 7.59, 18, 16, 15, 10, and 14 in today's game. So you can tell me if I'm stupid about this, but it just seems to me that when the Falcons offense is good, they throw the ball to Drake London. When the offense struggles is these games where they're like, oh, let's get Darnell Mooney in the mix and like, let's throw the ball to Drake London 4 times. I know that's oversimplifying it, but damn, it feels like that's kind of a trend at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And they probably wanted to put a show on for Cardi B because she was in the box, like hanging out with Robert Kraft during the game. So they wanted to at least, give Stephon Diggs a little bit of pressure, which I can understand.
That's right.
But still, for this game, I think the one switch up that I did see from Michael Penix was how quickly he got the ball out of his hands. Average 2.67 average time to throw, and they were all to Drake London. Pretty much 9 of his 10 targets were when he was trying to get the ball out as quickly as possible. So it feels to me like they came into this game where this is the concept, this is the read, execute. And Penix did it, and of course Drake London performed really well. But to your point, it has really condensed around these 3 guys. It's Michael Penix, it's Bijan Robinson with how he's being used in the passing game, and of course Kyle Pitts still performing well from a tight end standpoint. So while over the offseason, I was really looking at Darnell Mooney as a potential deep speed option for them and trying to see if he could be essentially the team's wide receiver too, with how that offensive line has been working and how Michael Penix has been at least trying to operate behind that offensive line as well. I'd really see him as more of a role player, ancillary option, and really it's condensed around those 3 guys from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, Drake London, 77 targets on the season, despite the fact that he's already had his bye. He's missed a game with an injury. So it's just like, yeah, that was kind of the thesis of Drake London this year, is that he was going to consolidate the power. Hopefully that continues to happen going forward. All right, that does it for the games we care most about. Now let's get into the games that we sort of care about, starting with a shocking upset in Green Bay. Panthers 16, Packers 13. I think we start with the Panthers here, and where else could we go but Rico Dowdle takes over this backfield, Chris. I will admit that we knew it was coming, right, in terms of he was going to get that promotion. He was going to be the starting back. Dave Canales essentially said that. They talked about Chuba Hubbard in these very kind of like past tense terms. But I will admit that I did not see this coming in terms of just how much of a lead he had over Chuba Hubbard. 83.3% of the running back rushes, 84% of the touches overall, 74% of the snaps. He touched the ball 27 times. Chuba Hubbard touched the ball 5 times. So is seeing this performance in a tough matchup, by the way, enough for you to say, like, hey, Rico Dowdle is the guy here, and he is a running back 1 rest of season?
Oh, 100%. And it's not just the results. I mean, of course, 48% rushing success rate, and also hitting a few explosives as well. It's not just the fact that he was able to put on this performance against this Packers defense that had been fairly stingy to opposing running backs. But if you also look at Bryce Young's performance in this matchup, they're not winning this game without Rico Dowdle doing what he did. I mean, Bryce Young essentially looks like that guy that's like a part of the group project, but he didn't really contribute all that much to it, because Rico Dowdle was the one that put them in all of the situations to do it. Because look at it. All of us were starting Tedero McMillan thinking he was going to be the wide receiver that, while it was going to be tough facing the Packers secondary, if Bryce Young could do anything, he was going to benefit from it. Didn't really get much out of him. It's because of Rico Dowdle's performance that they were even in this game and how they were able to pull off this upset. So, yeah, I would say that Canales has to look at Rico Dowdle as the true RB1 for this. None of this split backfield that we'd seen for a few weeks after Hubbard came back. It should be Rico Dowdle's backfield moving forward for sure.
It's worth noting for the performance of Bryce Young and Rico Dowdle, for just how good this was, the Panthers are still super banged up and kind of like cycling starters in and out on this offensive line. So there's a chance that this rushing, I don't know how much, it could be much better than the stats we're showing right now in terms of what he's done in the 3 games where he's really been the starter and been the guy. I don't really know how it could be much better than that, but I do think that the passing game could get a little better if this offensive line can get healthier. So that's something that we will continue to track. Obviously, tough matchup against the Green Bay Packers. That was a mismatch overall, that Panthers passing game versus the Packers defense. But I think this team's going to just try to just lead the NFL in rush attempts, like put the ball in Rico Dowdle's hands over and over again. And Chris, it's still, like I said it at the time, this is not hindsight. It still freaking stuns me that this guy got as little interest as he did in free agency. He signed a sub $3 million 1-year deal with this team to be the backup running back. Obviously, it's worked out for the Cowboys getting Javonte Williams in there, so I'm not like slamming them for letting Rico walk, but everybody else had a chance to sign Rico Dowdle. I didn't see him being this good, but still, he's been he's been excellent with this team, and I think you could have seen him being a value signing at this position coming.
Oh, 100%. And that's where I do wonder what was the thought process for other teams that wound up passing on him, because you see other running games that are struggling at this point where he was available on the market for at least this minimum signing for the Panthers. And I would say even the Panthers, I don't know how much they knew or how well Rico Dowdle could perform behind this backfield, because until Chuba Hubbard got hurt, it really was just the Chuba Hubbard show like we had seen throughout most of the 2024 season before Jonathan Brooks went down. So it's like, I'm not really concerned about the passing game, or not concerned about the rushing game just for how well that he's performed. But I think really, to your point earlier, it's the offensive line injuries. They did try and shift some of the protection, mitigate some of that by using a couple more tight ends on the field today. I think they had 2 tight ends on the field for about 30% of their plays, somewhere in there. So maybe that will help to produce or keep Bryce Young upright, and then also provide a few more rushing lanes for Rico Dowdle. But yeah, the hope would be that they get healthy, the passing game gets healthy, and of course Dowdle continues to do what he does on the ground and keep this Panthers offense moving.
Let's talk Packers here. Big loss for them in this game, and the losses continued to pile up after the game. According to Ian Rappaport, the fear. Oh my God, I don't even want to say this out loud. I've been dreading saying it out loud ever since it happened. The fear heading into the MRI for Tucker Kraft is that he tore his ACL in this game. He got run up on by one of his own teammates. It happens, and yeah, it looks like he tore his ACL. His season will likely be over. Matthew Golden also left this game with a shoulder injury, but losing Tucker Kraft after that monster performance last week, he was the tight end 1 overall in fantasy. It sucks. I'm upset about it. Tucker Kraft was like one of the flag carriers, players of this podcast, and now his season is likely over, Chris.
Yeah, and he does those things that it's the George Kittle stuff that happens after the catch that we will look at the numbers and say, do I have a filter on incorrectly? Because there's no reason how somebody can be averaging 11 to 12 yards after the catch. I can understand per catch, but 12 yards after the catch, that doesn't make any sense. I probably have something messed up on how I'm setting up this study or whatever. So it's always fun watching those players that can really defy or challenge what we see from a number standpoint, and Kraft is definitely one of them. So yeah, losing him and also essentially him being one of those short to intermediate options for Jordan Love, especially with Jaden Reed still out, that's really where we're going to see a lot of stress put onto this Packers offense, where, really, I have some concerns about Matt LaFleur, not as a play designer, but as a play caller, especially in this game. A lot of those calls really start to rear its ugly head. So I do think there are going to be better days ahead for the Packers, even with the loss of Tucker Kraft, because they still have enough talent around Jordan Love. But this is one of those where they needed to take this game handily, and they just couldn't do it.
I think that is a really good distinction about LaFleur, because I think as a play designer, he is one of the 2 or 3 best in the league, but there are times where it's like a second and long run. It's an overcommitment to the ground game. It's playing a little bit conservative that I think he has put this team in a bit of a bind at times. At the same time, though, you lose Tucker Kraft, like he is the straw that stirs the drink here. It's just like these receivers are solid. I mean, Romeo Doubs leads the way with 92% of the routes and was productive in this game. And I think Doubs has really taken a step forward as a player this year, but you just lose your one explosive element when Kraft is not out there, because Doubs, again, good player, but he's kind of a possession type player, not a huge big play threat. And Christian Watson runs around on 79% of the dropbacks, which is a miracle, but he's good for like one shot play a game, not a consistent, like we put the ball in his hands and he makes us right. So we'll see if with the Packers going forward, they have to like recover a little bit of momentum after losing a guy that has been clearly their best player in the passing game so far this year. Let's go to the next game here. Broncos 18, Texans 15. Once again, kind of a weird game for the Broncos offense. Bo Nix completed 2 of his 10 deep attempts, and both of those went for touchdowns, but otherwise there felt like a lack of consistency in this passing game once again, Chris.
Yeah, I should have known something was going to be not so great for this passing game, despite the defense they were facing was already bad enough. But when you're signing and activating 41-year-old Mercedes Lewis to your squad, I don't really think that's the best news for anybody that's on there, because why do you need a guy like that at this point? But we kind of, and not to say that he made an impact, but it's just I still have a number of questions about what this passing game is going to be, because we see RJ Harvey scoring another touchdown, but less than 30% of the snaps. We see Evan Ingram mixing in for a few targets here and there, but it's not productive. He's not really averaging. He's not doing the yak stuff that we saw when he was in Jacksonville even beforehand. So what is this offense? What is Bo Nix now in the second year? And again, understand that when you have guys like Derek Stingley on the back end to mess things up, and you have the defensive front from Houston trying to get to you as often as they can. I mean, Nix was pressured on around like 38, 39% of his dropbacks. That's going to frustrate any quarterback, but it's not just against the tough defenses. It's been against some of the layups as well from Bo Nix, and we haven't seen that down-to-down consistency from a passing success rate standpoint that we would expect with Cortland Sutton really coming into really operating as that team's wide receiver 1. Troy Franklin coming into his own as the team's established wide receiver 2, at least from what we've seen over the past 3 weeks. I think Franklin is pretty handily like their wide receiver 2 as of this point. But outside of that, where is that production, that pass game production that we really could see help elevate Bo Nix? I'm not seeing it from Nix, and I'm not seeing it from any of those receivers as well.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of an ongoing conversation, at least for me, and like what I'm thinking about is how much of this is the team doesn't trust Bo Nix to do more? How much is it that this is the offense that Sean Payton wants to run? And how much of it is they feel limited by their own personnel? Because to your point, they signed and then activated Mercedes Lewis, who mostly is like a blocking tight end and has been for the last 5 to 6 years of his career, maybe even longer than that. He's 41 freaking years old, for God's sakes. But they're also rumored to be kind of interested in a tight end at the deadline, maybe a wide receiver. And it's like, damn, you guys have thrown a lot of resources at this position. Are you not interested in developing these guys? I just am. It's not that the Broncos are a bad team, but I just find their offense to be a little bit frustrating and feel like I constantly want to see more than that. The Broncos have won 6 consecutive games for the first time since week 1 through 8 of 2015. So again, I'm criticizing this offense just because I want to see more. I don't even say I'm criticizing. I'm left wanting a little bit more, but this is a good team and we generally know where things are going. I will say RJ Harvey leads the team in receiving in this one. Him and Cortland Sutton were the recipients of those 2 deep touchdowns. So that's obviously doing a lot of the work here for RJ Harvey, but they're continuing to find some ways to get him involved as a receiver because J.K. Dobbins is not going anywhere as the lead running back. On the Texans side of things here, C.J. Stroud leaves the game after a concussion in the first half that was pretty brutal. I mean, he slams his head on the back of the turf after taking a pretty rough hit. Davis Mills comes in, and like we know what the Davis Mills show is. So the real update that we got from this team, Nico Collins comes back immediately, is the wide receiver 1, but Christian Kirk also returns, and Jalen Knoll just right back to the shelf. He runs 6 routes in this game while Xavier Hutchinson and Jaden Higgins kind of rotate that flanker position. People know my feelings on this. Super frustrating to see that out of Houston.
Yeah, what happened? What did Jalen Knoll do or not do enough of in last week's game in order to deserve more playing time? Because you and me, I think we were both on the same page after seeing them in their spot start that there should have been more work for both of them, like him and Higgins. But to see this downtick, I mean, that's a bit of, I'm frustrated like watching this. Now I get it. If you have to switch to Davis Mills, maybe you have to call a specific type of game. You need the veterans out there on the field that Mills would be more comfortable with. Maybe that's it. That's the only that I'm grasping at straws here to really understand why the switch up. But otherwise, the only takeaway that I had for the Texans passing game, Woody Marks starting to come in a bit more as the, let's say, high-end wide receiver, running back 3 somewhere in there moving forward, 47% of the snaps, also about a 50-50 split between him and Nick Chubb, and also seeing him mix in as a pass catcher around a 37% route rate. There should be enough there for him in PPR leagues to kind of make his way as the running back 3 somewhere in there if you're still having to deal with bye weeks or other injuries as well. But outside of that, it's this consternation with this wide receiver rotation that's really going to be, I think, a frustration for fantasy managers for the rest of the season.
Yeah, just don't get it. Like Jalen Knowles brought explosive playability and separation, and those are 2 of the things this team desperately needs right now. So don't really understand it, but it is what it is, and you have to make those adjustments for Jalen Knowles rest of the season unless something changes. Next game up here, Steelers 27, Colts 20. I think this game, the final score looks a little closer than it felt. The Steelers kind of controlled this one. Chris, I honestly don't think there's too much to discuss with this offense because nobody really did anything. Jalen Warren averaged 1.9 yards per carry, but got 2 goal line touchdowns. We already have a panic meter submission for DK Metcalf. I saw that. Love the mid-Sunday panic submissions. Get those things in early, guys. Like, get them in early. We love to see it. Do you have anything on the Steelers offense? Because like I said, the story is more on the other side of the ball here.
No, because even Calvin Austin, mixing in for about 4 or 5 targets somewhere in there. It's like, yeah, if you want to toss him in from if you have like bye week fill in or whatever, but even that's tough to trust. I'm not really taking anything away from that. And also the amount of opportunities that the Steelers offense had, whatever Mike Tomlin voodoo that he normally has throughout the season, he just saved it all up for this particular game. Because the drives that they scored 24 points off of turnovers. There was a sack fumble in the second quarter that led to Jalen Warren's first touchdown. That on the very next drive, it was an interception, and that's how you got the Pat Freiermuth touchdown. At the end of the third quarter, Daniel Jones throws, I think it was his second interception at that point that got you Jalen Warren's second touchdown. And then there was a sack fumble in the fourth quarter that wound up getting the Steelers a field goal. So it's just all of that Mike Tomlin voodoo or whatever that gets you to this point right here. So I'm not taking anything away, for at least on the Steelers side of things, that it's really just Jaylen Warren, DK Metcalf. After that, it's just a bunch of role players, and I don't want anything to do with the rest of those guys.
Yeah, Roman Wilson killer mistake in this one that almost let the Colts back into the game. So don't think we're seeing any promotion. I don't think anything that happened in this game are dissuading the Steelers from potentially trying to trade for a wide receiver here in the next few days. Like Jacoby Myers should already be on this team. Come on, let's get that deal done. Feels like that's been in the works for a while. All right, but we do have to talk about, in addition to the Mike Tomlin voodoo, and just like teams go into the Steelers' house and they just forget how to play their best football because that's just what happens. The other variable in this game, though, that I think is a little bit more significant, I have been so hard on this defense this year, and I think I was hard on them in the offseason, didn't really love the plan, have not loved what I've seen so far this year, but got to give them a lot of credit for this game. According to NFL Pro, in Week 9, the Steelers' defense showed a significant shift in their coverage tendencies. They used split safety coverage on 46% of their dropbacks after entering the week with the second lowest split safety usage in the NFL, 28%. And it was Jalen Ramsey going from corner to safety on 84% of his snaps. That's the first time in his career he's aligned at safety for over 30% of his snaps. They also got recently acquired Kyle Duggar, played 97% of the snaps. So to me, this feels pretty significant, Chris, because like Jalen Ramsey has long been sort of labeled as a potential safety convert. I think he's really struggled at cornerback this year. So this was something obviously the Colts did not expect, allowed them to harass Daniel Jones, in terms of he was pressured a ton in this game, and he only completed 6 of 13 pass attempts for 88 yards and 88 yards, and 2 interceptions when he was under duress, 5 sacks against him, 2 strip sacks. Really good defensive game plan that I think put the Colts kind of behind the 8 ball right away and through the rest of the game.
Yeah, and for anybody that's even remotely concerned, I'm surprised you haven't gotten any panic meters about the Chargers offense, because the LA faces Pittsburgh next week, and without Joe Alt, I can see a similar setup for the Chargers and their running game and passing game having to face this Pittsburgh Steelers defense.
Good point. And like the Colts guys ended up kind of, other than JT and Tyler Warren, this was like JT's first bad game of the year. Tyler Warren didn't get there. The receivers did get there. Like, hey, if they're going to move Jalen Ramsey to safety, that means they are opening up that other cornerback spot. And again, it was mostly a negative game script. They threw the ball a ton because they were trailing, but still, Pittman and Pierce both hit 115 yards on 25 combined targets. Josh Downs scores another red zone touchdown. I really love how they've been weaponizing him in that short area as the separator there. So the receivers did get home. Maybe we could see that next week for the Chargers. But, we'll get to the Chargers later on in the show. Not having Joe Alt, that's going to be a big variable against a defense that I really liked the counterpunches they showed in this game.
Yeah, and so here's one of the biggest differences between, because we talk about from a passing efficiency metrics, EPA per dropback, and then also passing success rate. And so EPA is essentially, are you either having being efficient and hitting those shots downfield, and so creating that yardage when you do, and also with success rate, it's how often you are creating efficient plays. And so in this game, with the number of turnovers from the strip sack fumbles and also the interceptions, Daniel Jones would look like a worse quarterback from an EPA standpoint. But when he's still hitting Alec Pierce on those deep shots, if you're still hitting Tyler Warren and Josh Downs and Michael Pittman on some of those sail concepts, he looks solid from a passing success rate because he's still getting the ball out to his receivers. It's just those negative plays and those turnovers that really drag you down from an EPA standpoint. So my biggest takeaway from this is, I'm ready to declare Alec Pierce as an every week starter if you have him on your roster for how often he's been getting the ball. I mean, right now he's averaging 8 targets per week over his last 3 to 4 games. So with how often the Colts try and use these levels concepts to get their guys open, I mean, it really does set up well for a guy like Alec Pierce. And of course, Pittman still getting his, Downs is still working well. And while Tyler Warren this week is the odd man out, I mean, how often have we talked about the Chargers receivers, and it's either going to be Lad McConkey this week, or it's QJ this week, or we've got Oronde Gatson. It's a similar thing that we're dealing with here with the Colts. It's just now, I mean, instead of Justin Herbert, it's Daniel Jones. So I'm with Alec Pierce. I think at the very least being let's say mid-range wide receiver 3-ish type of guy for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on that. I think Pierce has played really well this year, and I love that Chargers comparison. Very different type of teams, but I do like that comparison. As all three of these receivers are in play, and of course Tyler Warren is an every week starter as well. Last game here in this section. Jaguars 30, Raiders 29. The Jags get in overtime as the Raiders try to go for two. They ultimately lose on that play. We'll talk about the Raiders in a second. I think that's the bigger story. On the Jaguars side of things here, BTJ suffers a second half ankle injury after a catch and run play. So Parker Washington leads the way with we haven't addressed this yet because this happened on freaking Friday morning, but Travis Hunter on IR going to miss at least the next 4 weeks. What a brutal, you could tell the team was broken up about it. Liam Cohn was broken up about it. I'm broken up about it, getting that notification, walking around the neighborhood on Friday morning. I was ready to just toss the phone into the lake. So very upset about that. Still reeling. This team is still reeling, but Parker Washington leads the way with 8 for 90. And the ground game was super involved here as well. Tons of work to the running backs. Travis Etienne, of course, leading the way with a 69% share of the running back touches.
Yeah, and that was kind of my curiosity coming into this game was how are you going to replace Travis Hunter in his usage? Of course, Parker Washington stepping up from his usage out of the interior. I thought, at least from a receiving standpoint, he would be the pass catcher that would fit into that. But also, when you have other short area options like Dyami Brown, he wound up leaving that game with a concussion, if I'm remembering correctly. But also, Travis Etienne has also been a serviceable pass catcher. There are ways you can create some of that production, but it's just the efficiency that Hunter was starting to show over those 2 to 3 weeks before they got into their bye that you're just not going to be able to recreate from with any of those guys. So it's good to at least see Trevor Lawrence get there from a passing standpoint, having to shift from his rapport that he had with Travis Hunter to these other guys, but still without having an established wide receiver one, because remember, BTJ came into this game with a shoulder injury, leaves with another one. So without having that established wide receiver one for this pass catching group is probably going to leave them somewhat listless from a passing game standpoint, but at least they were able to walk away with the W.
Yeah, at least they got out of there with that win. I wouldn't feel great about it as a Jags fan, like it came that close with the Raiders, but yeah, it's just tough. Like you're playing Austin. I don't know who Austin Tramwell is, but he ran 14 routes in this game. Tim Jones runs 6 routes. It's just not an ideal situation when you were hoping to be in the Travis Hunter post-bye rookie bump zone, and you've got BTJ, the injuries. There's 3 drops in this game, 1 from Brian Thomas, 1 from Dyami Brown, 1 from Hunter Long. It's just they need Brenton Strange back. They need Travis Hunter back, but we don't know when those guys are coming back. If Hunter is going to come back at all this season, Liam Cohen was non-committal when it came to that. On the Raiders side of things, though, speaking of coming back, Brock Bowers back in our lives, 12 catches, 127 yards, and 3 freaking touchdowns. I mean, in one sense, Chris, I don't know if you have any Brock Bowers teams. I don't. But in one sense, if I had Bowers on my team, I would be happy to see this. Obviously, this is awesome. I'd also be so annoyed that they didn't just sit him right away and let him get healthy. And it took like finally taking him off the map to get him back to full strength. Because now it's just, again, this wasn't a great performance by the Raiders. They lose the game, but Geno Smith throws 1 pick, 4 touchdowns. It's like, oh, right. He was supposed to be the whole thing. The whole thing is supposed to be built out of freaking Brock Bowers.
Yeah, and we were talking about it earlier today about once you have your, not in this case, your wide receiver one, but let's say your pass catcher one, your primary option back into the offense, it slots everybody back into their correct positions instead of forcing them into positions that they really can't play. Because we know that Jacoby Myers, while a serviceable wide receiver, he should be the focal point of your offense. I mean, the same thing for Trey Tucker, a good speed out deep threat option, but he shouldn't be your wide receiver 2. He should be the guy that essentially operates as your wide receiver 3. So having Bowers back, I mean, the man was he had, I know that yards per route run is something you can't do in a 1-game sample, but an absurd 6.47 yards per route run on this game. I mean, for how often he was getting targeted from Geno Smith. And of course, having a guy like that opens up a lot for your running back, for your rushing game as well. Ashton Jeanty now has one of his better days on the ground, averaging 2 yards before contact, which is his second best mark throughout this entire season. So this is really, like we were talking earlier about Tucker Kraft being the straw that stirs the drink. Clearly that's the case for Bowers and this Raiders passing game as a whole.
Yeah, Jeanty catching 5 of 5 targets, 47 yards and a touchdown. Like, this is a little bit more. I wasn't high on the Raiders going into the year, but this is more what I think they wanted to be. Like Ashton Jeanty involved in all phases. Brock Bowers is the guy. So it's just man, you really hope that you can see more of those two guys going forward, because those are the focal points of this offense, and they should be. Jacoby Myers comes back here, 6 targets, 4 catches for just 23 yards. Again, you wonder if this is his last game with the team. Neither Jack Besh nor Dante Thornton ran a route in this game. Tyler Lockett wasn't even that involved either. So we'll see what those guys look like, but obviously the main focal point is Brock Bowers, and it should continue to be for this Raiders team. All right, that does it for the games that we sort of care about. Now let's get into the games that could have been an email. We've got 3 here to go through pretty quickly. Number 1, 49ers 34, Giants 24. CMC crushes a pitiful Giants defense that is playing well below some of its talent, at least up front. Mac Jones completed 19 of 24, and I just continue to feel like the Giants don't have a lot of pop on offense at this point.
The stat from this game: Mac Jones didn't have an incompletion until the second half of this game. That's really all. That's all I got for this one. It was that bad for how little they were getting pressure against Mac Jones. Just 25% pressure rate against the Giants with their lack of pass rush, and also what we saw on the back end. Juwan Jennings getting there. George Kittle, while not a ton of work for him, at least being productive or effective with the few receptions that he got. And then of course it's just CMC and Brian Robinson bulldozing through defenders for a touchdown as well. I mean, it was just everything working for the 49ers offense, which they really needed it after what happened to them the previous week.
No question. Yeah, Mac Jones very efficient on passes of 0 to 19 air yards, or 0 to 10 air yards, 12 of 14 for 119 in both of his touchdowns. Let's just see this team fully healthy at some point. I just feel like I say that every single week, but the bones are there for this to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. Next game, Chargers 27, Titans 20. The 2 big pieces to talk about with the Chargers here. I know we're rapid firing, but 2 big pieces to talk about. One, you mentioned it earlier, that Joe Alt is believed, according to Adam Schefter, to have suffered another high ankle sprain. Only this time it could require a procedure to repair, per sources. He's going to undergo an MRI on Monday, but that is just, it's so critical. This offense really, there's a difference between when Joe Alt is in there and when it's not. So that is just a bummer to see. He was carted off here. The other thing I wanted to note too is that Keenan Allen continues to lose playing time as this team works in Trey Harris as a run blocker and kind of part-time receiver, and Arondé Gadsden, that era continues to roll. He led the team in receiving yards. Allen hasn't cracked 55% of the routes or 37% of the snaps in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I noted from the Chargers backfield is that Kamani Vidal, while we expected him to get a ton of the rushing production, just 57.1% of the shares and a single target, saw a lot more of Jarrett Patterson than I'm comfortable with, because we assumed without Hassan Haskins, it was just going to be all Vidal, and going up against the Titans run defense, it was going to be something of a smash spot. Didn't see even like a explosive run from him either. So if we're going to have offensive line concerns and now also a potential backfield split between him and Patterson, I mean, the days of Vidal being the RB1, especially with Amari Hampton out, they might be coming to an end.
Do you have anything to say about the Tennessee Titans in this game? Because they did not score an offensive touchdown. Jahmyr DK scored a return touchdown, and the defense got a pick six.
The only guy that of note is just Tajay Spears continuing to force a split between him and Tony Pollard. So if you are looking for an RB3 flex type of play, I would say Spears kind of profiles as that type of guy. I mean, averaging 3.8 targets per game since his return. So while the Tennessee offense isn't really one that we want to target for overall production, Spears, at least with the touches that he's getting, if you need him in a pinch, I guess he could be viable.
Last game here, Rams 34, Saints 10. Not only does Matthew Stafford, after 4 touchdown passes today, lead the NFL in passing touchdowns, he already has more touchdowns than he did all of last year with 21. So the Rams offense continues to roll. Kyron Williams had 100 yards in this one. Blake Corum even got involved. So the Rams, Cook, Puka Nacua back. Left the game, of course, with a chest injury, but he came back and he was totally fine. So 95 yards and a touchdown for the guy who was breaking fantasy football before his injury. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, the first 4 plays from the Rams were a 10-yard pass to Nacua, a 9-yard pass to Nacua, a 20-yard pass to Devontae Adams, and a 16-yard pass to Davis Allen. I mean, it was just Matthew Stafford just doing Matthew Stafford stuff. I think there was at least 2 times I got the notifications showing Stafford doing a no-look pass to either Adams or Nacua before Nacua went down. So whatever was working, whatever the Rams wanted to do, it was working against the Saints pass defense.
Did you have any big feelings about the Tyler Shuck era? Tyler Shuck makes the start. Taysom Hill leads the team in rushing, so that's about how the run game is at this point. Do we care about the Saints passing game at all?
No, not really. I mean, let's the hope we see something different from Rashid Shaheed. I'd say the production is certainly there. And why I say something different, I'm hoping he winds up getting traded. We were talking earlier about other teams potentially needing a guy like Shaheed. So I do feel like his talent is getting wasted now with Tyler Shuck under center. Not to say that Spencer Rattler was a world beater or anything along those lines, but with Shuck and how he responds to pressure, I have at least some concerns about Rashid even reproducing the performance that he had today.
Right tackle Talis Fuaga left this game as well with an injury. So offensive line injuries continue to mount for a team that is now starting a quarterback who, as you mentioned, is pretty sensitive to the pressure and wants to get that ball out fast. So Chris Olave, 57 yards on 3 catches, 4 targets. That's got to be a season low for him. So definitely not great in the first start of the Tyler Shuck era, but it is a tough defensive matchup on the road, so we can at least throw that context out there. Chris Allen, that's going to do it for us today. Appreciate you doing this as always, man. Week 9 was a whirlwind for us.
Week 9, another loss from Bengals. That was tough to watch yet again and having to recap. But like I said at the top, it's something that we have to go through week in and week out. There's always going to be chaos and always something that we're going to have to take from each of these games. So it's a good mental exercise regardless of the outcome, but happy to do it with you, brother, every week.
No doubt. Happy to have you here as always. Also happy that we'll be back tomorrow on Monday with Justin Boone as he joins me for the People's Panic Meter show. I know there's going to be some panic, some low scores by some big name players, so you can always tweet at me or Boone. I throw the tweet out after Sunday Night Football. But if you want to make sure you get to the front of the line, email us at fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. Voice memos, videos are a course of courage. You all absolutely killed it last week, so the bar is high. Don't let me down this week, all right? You set the bar high last week. Don't rest on your laurels. Top it here for the post-week 9 panic. Hit fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. Try to get those submissions in between 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern or before that. If you get it in a little later, maybe, but don't be pushing it. These producers work hard, all right? They got to get these graphics done, so try to get those submissions in by 3 p.m. Eastern on Monday as we go live at 5 p.m. right here on YouTube. Until then, we are out.